podcast, and I'm super excited to talk to my guest today because we've known each other for a while. And actually, before I even knew what the hell I was doing in MMA, this man was in Chicago, came down to the studio, did an interview with me. How stupid was I? I didn't know just how great of a guy he was and just how talented of a broadcaster he was. He is the one and only RJ Clifford. RJ, you do so much in this business. It's great to see everything that you're doing now, especially solo hosting MMA Today on Sirius XM.
I very much appreciate the kind words. Don't feel too bad. I've known my wife 20 years and she still doesn't know all the good things I do. So you're on track.
Well, I do have one thing though. So I
Mhm.
don't know that you're going to remember this, but I need to correct me if I'm wrong. Stage manager for UFC, correct?
Correct.
All right. So the UFC weigh-in shows, which I absolutely love. Now I've worked with you at Sirius XM for a little bit, worked with Dean Thomas for a little bit. I've had
Mhm.
all you guys on the show before. There was a time, I forget the event, but there was a time in which you guys were doing like a putt-putt contest, and Laura was doing putting in her heels. I tweeted
Mhm.
about it, tweet made it on the screen. And then DC and Dean Thomas went on a 10-7 attack on me on the broadcast. And I was like, where's RJ to defend me? And Dean was like, well, I knew it was you, so I knew you could handle it. I just got destroyed by those two guys thinking I was just looking for Lorosenko's attention.
Well, let's call a spade a spade. I think you got her attention, right? Which isn't the worst thing in the world, you know. And but it is true. I mean, the things we put Senko through on the weigh-in show, and she's again normally in heels and obviously a fine combat sports athlete, but not really do a lot of other athletic things. She doesn't know like she doesn't really follow sports in general, just mostly MMA, and so she's always a good sport about it until she isn't. So keep them coming because you're gonna see a lot more of it.
On a lighter note, though, how just significant has that show become? Because, we got so used to watching the weigh-ins for the drama of who's making weight, who's missing what's going to happen next. But to provide fans with a full-on show with the fun games, the contests, who's getting the belt, all that kind of comes in together with that show. How
Yeah.
significant of a addition has that been?
Well, it was a unique opportunity. So obviously, when they commissions and under the UFC's behest started moving the weigh-ins from like 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and it's just like, all right, you're on the big stage. There's your weigh-in. There's your one chance and go. They opened it up to having a 2 hour window in the morning, giving greater chance to rehydrate and all these things, and that opened up a lot of possibilities because that opened up some serious drama and the weigh-in show didn't come along until several months after they instituted that rule. And so there was high drama in those weigh-in rooms. Like, when is the fighter going to show up? Are they the first ones on the scale? That tells you something. Are they the last ones on the scale? That tells you something. Do they miss? Do they have to retry? How do they look when they're on that scale? Like, these are all high drama moments. And I always joke that, what's terrible for Saturday is good for Friday, and what's terrible for Friday is good for Saturday. So if all the fighters make weight, great. Everything's moving on Saturday as it's supposed to. But if they don't, there's high drama. And so because there's a 2 hour window and the show's, generally around 2.5 hours long, we don't know if guys are going to make weight or not. We don't know if there's going to be weigh-in drama. So if there isn't, and everyone's all weighed in 45 minutes 45 minutes into the weigh-in window, we got an hour and a half of TV to make or hour and a half of YouTube to make. And so it's like, all right, here's some discussions, here's some games, here's some bits, here's some contests, here's all these things, some interviews. Like, here's things that we can kind of mix and match because we have this giant window, no commercial breaks. It's all on YouTube, and it was ESPN Plus for a while and Fight Pass. And so we kind of throw everything we can at it. And you should see the stuff that doesn't make the show. I mean, half the time, like in Newark, New Jersey, we had this whole setup to have Megan O'Leary and Jim Miller have a cooking contest, and we just didn't have enough time. We had tables set up, we had burners ready. Megan was there before the show started, like mixing flour and egg together to make her own homemade, pasta, and we just didn't have time for it. It didn't work out, and so might have to pull that back at another point.
Who would you have taken on that cook-off, Jim Miller or Megan O'Leary?
Oh, Megan. Oh, Megan. Just follow her on Instagram. She's a queen in there. It's unbelievable what she can do. It was kind of unfair to Jim. It was almost like like Welcome to the League rookie. Like you have to cook against Megan O'Leary. It'd be like wrestling against DC. Like you don't have much of a chance.
I, I could just see Jim Miller just kind of going out back wherever he can in the woods in New Jersey, finding an animal, skinning it right there, and being like, "This is what I got. This is what I got." And Megan's doing a whole
he
homemade
used
pasta.
he used to brew his own beer, so I wanted him to do that. But I guess like he moved, and like the new spot didn't have a good brewery. And it's like, oh, the sacrifices you make when you move.
Right, right. I know you love a good beer. I know that from knowing you. I know that from watching the show. What is the most difficult challenge for you in operating something like the weigh-in show?
Um, well, I mean, let's be honest. Like my job isn't all that difficult on the weigh-in show. Like I am involved in kind of like the writing process ahead of time, coming up with ideas and executing them, and then just kind of stage managing set. But like the real difficulty goes into whoever's hosting it. Normally Dan Helly, and unlike most shows, like our rundown is very fluid because the main event could weigh in at 9:01 local or 10:59 local or not at all, and so you have to pivot right away when guys are weighing in, and when fighters are ready to do interviews, you got to pivot right away. And so the producer, lead producer Zach Candido, and then Cody's kind of the frontline producer, and who's ever hosting it have their hands full because the show's constantly moving around and changing, and we're just kind of just living in the moment, which is what makes it fun. And because it is kind of a looser show, we can get away with, you know, things that maybe on a stricter show we couldn't. But they're the experts. They're the ones really wowing me.
I think Zach does an absolute fantastic job. You're kind of running producing all the shows, everything that has to do with UFC events and shows and all of that. So credit to all of you out there, working with the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
So you're also the hosting on Sirius XM,
Mm-hmm.
and I had just talked to Jimmy Smith after his departure. Now he's back with Bellator, and you're taking as a solo host. How do you juggle all of this?
I mean, I don't know. It's I've worked in MMA and in broadcast for almost 20 years now. Was magazine writing before that, and then was fighting before that, and then magazine writing, and then radio came along, and some TV stuff came along, and I don't know, man. If Elon Musk can be the CEO of three different multi-billion-dollar companies, I guess I could do radio and write and stage manage. I don't think I shouldn't really be that tough at the end of the day, right? Like every time I want to complain about my work, or I'm jet lagged, or there's so many things to do, it's like, come on, man. Somewhere right now there's a dude in West Virginia driving a pickup truck, dying of black lung, punching the radio, hearing me complain. It's like, yeah, it's got its highs and lows, but come on, man, I've had way tougher jobs than this.
One guy you talked about on that UFC weigh-in show is Dan Helly. I see the football over your shoulder there. And Dan Helly's a guy I've known just from the
Marshawn
broadcasting world for
Lynch,
so long.
Marshawn Lynch signed
Marshawn Lynch,
football
I love
right
that.
there.
I
Yep.
love that about that action.
That was actually given to me for my birthday from the Sirius XM Fight Nation crew. Josh Friedman, my
That's
old
awesome.
producer, got everyone together to get me a Marshawn Lynch signed football. Appreciate it.
Was that when was that after I left?
I
Because I would
think so. Yeah. So you didn't have to pitch in. You left just in time.
have. Well, now that means I just owe you. I don't have
Yeah.
any kind of like connections as great as Marshawn Lynch, but I can get you something. I owe you something at least for doing this interview. But when you have a guy like Dan Helly and really just so many inside the UFC have shown their versatility, whether it be like a Laura Sanko, like yourself, doing stage managing, doing Sirius XM hosting, Laura calling fights, and then being a part of broadcast shows, and Dan Helly, a guy who can just broadcast and host really anything. What does that say, and how much do you credit a guy like Dan Helly for just jumping right in and doing the job he's done?
Well, he's such a pro that there could be any sport that he could jump in and do. I mean, he's calling Power Slap now. Like the guy is called NFL games. He's called, baseball, college basketball, Power Slap, hosting the weigh-in show. I mean, these are all completely different gigs, right? Like when you're calling NFL game, an actual real time, real season NFL game on a network television. That's, about as high as you can get in sports, right? NFL. And then you go to Tuesday Night Contender Series, which is a little bit, it's kind of wild and raucous. And you've got, in the first season, you had Snoop Dogg, like just having the bong resin wafting through the air ducts, and you're calling a fight there. And then you're going to the weigh-in show, and then you're doing Power Slap. Like it just shows like the diversity of some of these really good broadcasters. And honestly, it adds. I just had John Anik on my show, 2 weeks ago, and I said, in my opinion, there's no one that's done more to professionalize MMA than you, because he came in during a time when it was, Goldie and Rogan and Affliction shirts and, let's bleed, just bleed. And then he comes in and is like, look, this is how professional this thing can be on ESPN, major pay-per-views, broadcast throughout the world, multi-billion-dollar company. Like, this is the level of profession, and not professionalism like you're stuck up in a suit, but just you get everyone's name pronunciation correct. You're flowing between fights so well. You're telling the fighter stories so well. And that's what it's a rough and tumble sport. I don't want it to be too nip tuck, right? It's at the end of the day, it's two dudes trying to give each other concussions in a steel cage. But to be able to tell the fighter stories and put on a good broadcast, we got a good team able to do it.
I gotta say, I think that's one thing I've learned. I learned from you very quickly early on because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in MMA, and you having a beer with me before we did an interview that probably helped the nerves in talking to you the
Mhm.
first time I ever met you. But just understanding like my place and wanting to help fighters tell their stories, not tell it for them. So every show that you guys do in the UFC, everything that you guys do in the UFC, I take a little bit from each and every show, no matter what it is, a weigh-in show, a live event, a broadcast call, from John Anik himself. I take something away from that. So I thank you and everyone for that. To that point, Fight Inc. just came out on the Roku channel, and I thought it was an incredible behind the scenes look.
Mhm.
Not only was it unique just, to see all that, but how significantly important do you think it is for diehard fans, those who maybe want to be on the media side, and casual fans to take the 2 hours to sit down and watch the 3 episodes because it shows such a different, unique aspect of what this fight game is all about.
Yeah, I've seen 2 episodes so far. I haven't caught up on the entire thing yet. I'm about to. And it's a traveling circus behind the scenes at the UFC, and I'm pretty much just on the one tiny little corner of that on the production, and even on the small production side, I'm just a tiny little corner of that. But even then, I can kind of see, I call the thing a well-oiled clusterfuck, because that's kind of what it is. It's like things are changing all the time, fighters are falling out, venues are changing, all the sponsors are coming in at this time. This celebrity showing, like, it's this entire mess. But so much of that crew has been there 10, 20 years, and everyone just kind of rolls with it. And to it's wild putting on a high level mixed martial arts contest in a giant venue and on pay-per-view broadcast everywhere with 150 so employees, 28 so fighters, all their corners and managers and all the different teams. I mean, they highlighted the production team, the PR team, and kind of like the management side, but there's so much more to that too. There's legal, there's we call them the black shirts, the guys that build the octagon and set it up, the blue shirts, guys that wrangle up the fighters. There's just That's just a tiny portion of the traveling circus. That's the UFC.
I think one of the mainstays in that is through the 2 episodes, and I think you'll see it more in the final one. But for those who have seen it, like myself, like Hunter Campbell is so significantly important to this company, almost if not as much as Dana White, because there are just things that Hunter Campbell will do to get the job done, to get these fights done. I think that for me, as someone who's tried to say they've been around the sport for a little bit, nowhere close to the amount of time you've put in the sport, especially the UFC. It's just like to see that kind of behind the scenes of who Hunter Campbell is and what he gives to the UFC. I thought it was very unique, and I thought it was super cool to see. So I love that that came out. Now you're not someone who bites their tongue, and you have a lot of good comedic flow about you.
Uh-oh,
As you
now I'm on the
move to
spot.
this new role. No, it's just compliments. It's just compliments.
Like, all right,
But
RJ, be
as
funny. Answer this question, make me laugh. Go.
no, what should everyone who tunes in from 12 to 3 Eastern, Mondays and Fridays, when you're solo hosting, expect? I know on Thursdays you'll be with Alan Jouban, but as a solo host, what are you hoping to bring to the audience?
Well, hopefully, I make your commute, to and from work a little bit better. The greatest compliment you can give a radio host is, yeah, I pulled into my driveway during your show and I let the car run for another 45 minutes because I just had to listen, and you just had me hooked, which is the greatest compliment I can receive. I look, I'm just hoping to, add some context and analysis of the sport that mixed martial arts I've been a part of for a really long time. Hopefully make you laugh a little bit, make you think a little bit. You might get pissed here and there. You might not like what I say, but I dare you to say that I'm wrong. And hopefully some good interviews and some sophisticated dick and fart jokes that I know you're looking for, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. There it is. I was waiting for it. It took a good 20 minutes before I got rid by you. I've always appreciated that. But I believe truly and honestly that your appointment listening, honestly.
Appreciate it.
When I heard that, when I saw the tweet, I saw the news, it's kind of now going to be part of my routine, especially working from home. No music on. If I'm not doing interviews, I'm going to have your show on in the background. Obviously, I have so much respect and love for everyone over at Sirius XM Fight Nation. And because of my time there and all the stuff I learned from you guys, before I get you out of here, I do want to just kind of get your thoughts on some hot topics. And the biggest one, obviously, is the Irish elephant in the room, and the
Mm.
uncertainty of Conor McGregor. Without going too deep into it, I'll just ask this: if Conor McGregor does not fight at UFC 303, will we see him fight again?
I think we will see him fight again. Um, for all of Connor's, wackiness and things he's done and showing up late, he's never pulled out of a fight. He's never done that. And what's unique about this situation is, obviously Connor doesn't need the money. Obviously, Connor has, his businesses. He's got his restaurant. He's got his stout. He's got his whiskey. He's got a Hollywood career that's brewing. Lord knows what else he's got going. But when you pull out of an event of this magnitude, right? When you pull out of a giant UFC pay-per-view, and reports are, I think Dana White said they already sold $20 million at the gate, which is already a UFC record, and we're still what, a week, 2.5 weeks away. When you do something like that, yes, it pisses off fans, pisses off the UFC, ticket buyers, sponsors. But when you put something of this magnitude in jeopardy, there's dudes with white collars in boardrooms that are pissed. There's Fortune 500 CEOs and officers that are like, well, we were going to do this with Connor. Now we're going to do it with some other actor, or now we'll do it with Tom Brady, or we'll do it with whoever, right? Like, so much is hinging on a giant UFC pay-per-view. And for Conor McGregor to risk that, I mean, that's more than just, pissing off some fans. That's more than just, pissing off Dana White. That's pissing off some Fortune 500 movers and shakers. So this is no small deal. This, potentially having UFC 303 in limbo.
Yeah, and what does it say about Michael Chandler, right? Here's a guy who's waited for so long for this fight. He could have had, I posed the same question to Jimmy Smith. He could have had three, four, maybe, who knows how many fights Michael Chandler could have had during this waiting period. Do you feel for him, or is it kind of just that was his decision? What's your thoughts on Michael Chandler and just this whole situation?
Well, I mean, it sucks, but how much? Like, he's got the winning lottery ticket in his hand, and that's a fight with Conor McGregor on pay-per-view. He's just struggling to find the liquor store to cash it in on, right? Like, this is what every fighter wants. Like, every boxer wanted to fight with Floyd Mayweather or Canelo or Usyk. Like, that's why you fight your entire life in combat sports. It's not the purses along the way. It's the giant multi-million-dollar payday where you can retire and be settled in. Like, that's what you want to do, is get that one big paycheck. It's not the pennies you pick up along the way. It's cashing in on the burlap sack of gold bullion at the end of the rainbow. And so, I mean, Michael Chandler kind of has no choice. Like, this is where he's at, and this is what every fighter would want. The second Michael Chandler says, well, I'm not taking the fight, then 50 fighters will be like, I'm ready. I'll go right now. I will, I'll cut from heavyweight to 170 to make this fight with Conor McGregor, and I'll hop on a plane tomorrow to do it. And Michael Chandler's no dummy; he knows that. So he's got that winning lottery ticket, and he's just waiting to cash it.
I know, obviously, you work with the UFC, but I do have to get your thoughts because one, I haven't talked to you in a very long time, but two, the sport of MMA shifted huge in the landscape with PFL merging with Bellator and purchasing on Bellator. And I know we've seen this in the sport before, but not when it felt like there wasn't as many opportunities moving forward. We don't know the future of Bellator. We don't know how PFL is going to play out over the coming years. When you see kind of this big shift in the sport, what are just kind of your thoughts as a as a fan and as a host, not that obviously as a UFC guy, you don't want to see other people succeed, but would you like to see PFL and Bellator kind of figure it out and then it just help grow the sport continuously?
The sport's so much better if there's people investing in it and jobs for fighters. I mean, there's sports infinitely better. And I really like the PFL. I think I'm one of the few people that do based on their ratings, but I like the tournament format. I like how their roster's constructed between foreign guys, past UFC fighters, young up and coming fighters. Like I like how the roster's constructed. I love their broadcast team. I like how it's on like on Thursdays and other days of the week that don't conflict with my Saturday nights. Like I'm not a I watch football and hockey, but I don't watch a lot of other sports. Like I don't watch baseball or basketball. So to have MMA on during the week is great. Absolutely love it. Um, Anything that MMA can do to add more opportunities for fighters and put more cameras and more cameras on fighters and dollars in their pockets, good. But this has been going on for as long as MMA's been around. Leagues have come, leagues have disappeared, leagues have merged. The next big thing with this great idea showed up and then it didn't happen. I mean, I doubt this is it for Scott Coker. I mean, he was doing kickboxing in the 80s. He did Strike Force and then went into Bellator. I mean, anyone wants to get into MMA, I'm sure they're calling him. So it feels kind of finite. It feels like a big change, but I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I was a history major and I've seen so many leagues come and go and nothing drastically change. Just give me more fights. The rest of it can work itself out.
You guys on Sirius XM had a great exclusive with Shannon Knapp, who I actually on the same day that we're recording this, I was able to get an interview with Shannon. Now she did say, and I want to reiterate this, so next time you guys are on there, Dean Thomas has to have abs in order to be a ring boy for them.
Yeah.
That is the
So
main
that's not happening.
stipulation.
Yeah. So that's not happening. Yeah. Dean really buried himself because we put her on the spot and we're like, all right, can Dean be a ring card boy? And she said yes, as long as he has abs. And Dean's like, done. It's like, all right, well, that's a binding contract. That is a legally binding verbal agreement, Dean, that you need to have 6-pack abs. And we specified 6 abs. You can't just have one. You need to have all 6 abs showing to be a ring card boy. So I don't know if we'll see him in one of those like oversized T-shirts with like the fake abs on it, or yeah, there's like airbrushing you can do. There's options for him, but he's gotta deliver now. He's really painting himself into a corner.
But what does it mean? Like we just talked about Bellator,
Can I
PFL,
just
all
say
that, but
I love
yes,
how there's 5 things in your background and 40% of
yeah,
them are from The Office. You've got the Michael
yeah,
Scott, 2 Michael Scott quotes. You've got a Rocky
yeah.
Balboa fist in the air, UFC 300 poster. I don't know what that boxing poster is.
That's Nate Diaz choking out Jake Paul during their
Okay,
fight.
so that's a semi-box.
Or-
Yeah, so you've got the biggest event of all time. You've got circus match boxing, the greatest movie sports franchise of all time, and then Michael Scott. That's
yes, I have
eclectic.
two Michael Scott. I have wait,
Yeah.
hold on, it gets better. I
Okay.
have 2 Michael Scott quotes. I have Bruce Buffer's cologne. I went
Okay.
ahead and purchased that,
How's that
and then
smell?
I have a
You
whole
do you wear it?
like a world champ. Yeah,
Okay.
I like a
Good.
world champ. I've got a bunch of Funkos. This whole shelf is The Office. I've got Goodfellow Funkos, a Marcus Smart Funko, and then UFC 300 Prime. So
What's a Funko?
I've got
I'm 40. I don't know this stuff.
I mean, they're just little collectors.
Okay.
They're just, I don't know. I remember as a kid, the Thai Beanie Babies were a thing, and I feel like
So they're
this
the
is
new
like
Beanie
the
Baby?
2024.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, and they
Are they
have
are they
every
cooler than
single thing.
Beanie Babies were, or is this just as lame?
100%. Yeah.
Okay, good.
The
Good
the
to know.
problem that I do, like Funko collectors probably hate me because I take them out of the box
Oh,
and
that's a
I
big no-no.
put them on.
Yeah, you can't resell
That's a
them.
big no-no. Yep. Yep. I don't care. But and I will I won't take up much of your time.
Well,
You
as
threw
what
me
Michael
off there.
Scott, aka Steve Carell, told us in 40-year-old version, is they lose their value when you take them out of their packaging.
That
So
is true. I
that
love
should be
that. Look
another.
at
That should be
that.
the other quote up on your board. Michael Scott.
I've got more stuff I need to put on here. A lot more stuff that I need to put on here. And this Nate Diaz and Jake Paul's from the very talented Ross Baines. Got to shout him out. I know Joe Rogan has a lot of his artwork there. So Ross Baines for fight artwork is probably my go-to guy for that kind of stuff. But as I let you get out of here, I do want to one more on Invicta. How important is it, because you've been around the sport for so long, and I'm going to specifically say for women's MMA, is it because I've been doing PFL interviews for this fight week, and there's been a few flyweights who have said like, I don't know where I would have been fighting if the PFL didn't have this flyweight tournament. So when Invicta comes back, they're on CBS Sports Network now. That was announced this week. How significantly important is it to the growth of women's MMA to have Invicta FC around?
Well, like I said, I mean, the more promotions, the better in my eyes. It's just giving fighters more opportunities. In this case, female fighters opportunities. And like, look, MMA is awful at development. It is atrociously bad at development. Like for football, it's like you're playing in Pop Warner and then high school and then college. And then by the time you're in the NFL, you've had, 10 seasons under your belt. And same thing in basketball, but then they have like the G League and European leagues and all this kind of stuff. In baseball, you've got AAA, AA, all blah, blah, blah. In boxing, you have USA boxing and you can have 100, 200 amateur fights before you go pro. You have Olympic dreams. Wrestling, the same thing. It's like MMA has none of that. MMA has none of that. Like you hear all the time, like fighters, like how'd you make a living? Oh, my girlfriend works while I'm just fighting on the regional scene before I get to the UFC or one of those other million rings, like million things. And so anytime there's and people give Invictus some shit sometimes, like oh they have a 1-0 girl on there. It's like where else are they gonna go? Like you got to start, you got to go somewhere, you got to start somewhere. It's not like they've it's not like they're the NFL and they have access to, the world's best everything. You gotta develop these guys and girls. And anyone that can do that, I'm all for because MMA needs it.
Before I let you go, something outside of fighting that we both have a passion and love for,
Okay.
the NFL.
Mhm.
How do you see your Raiders doing this year? I can finally ask that as a Chicago Bears fan and not know that I'm just gonna get mocked as soon as I ask that. Like, oh, how's your team gonna do? And they're like, really, from a Bears fan? So I have a lot of optimism, but how are you feeling coming into 2024?
Well, you guys beat us with Tyson Badgett last season. I appreciate you having the fortitude not to bring it up. That we got Tyson
I
fucking Badgett batter us around, which was pretty embarrassing. So, but look, I mean, you've got the stink of Josh McDaniels that we're still getting off. The team is so jacked on Antonio Pierce. The defense out of nowhere got good. Like for the the Raiders defense has been far below average for 2 decades. And all of a sudden, Max Crosby went off and picked up Jack Jones off, for free off the scrap heat. He became our number one corner right away. We just picked up Christian Wilkins on the defensive line to make things good. Malcolm Kuntz got really good on the other side of the defensive line. The defense is just absolutely fantastic, but it's the offense that we're going to worry about, right? I mean, we've got weapons, right? Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, just drafted Brock Bowers. Zeus or our backup behind Josh Jacobs, and he's playing great, but who's going to throw him the rock, right? Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. No one is high on our quarterback room, and I guess understandably so. But something I've been a Raider fan my entire life, but I have to say something I've never said in my entire 4 decades as a Raider fan is if we're going to win, it's going to be on the back of our defense. And so, we'll see if we can do like kind of a Brock Purdy offense, right? Where whoever it is just kind of distributes it to our weapons and things happen. And then otherwise, we've got to rely on Max Crosby, Jack Jones, and company to keep the games tight.
Who would you prefer to see at quarterback?
Aiden O'Connell for sure. I mean, obviously the ceiling is highest with him. It's so funny. We're going to Gardner Minshew's, I think, 7th season and Aiden O'Connell's 2nd. Minshew's only like 17 months older than Aiden O'Connell with how college is these days. And you can be like a 7th
Yep.
year senior or whatever. Like that's kind of weird. But obviously, like Minshew is who he is. And so Aiden O'Connell, we don't know what he is yet. I mean, he played really, not really, he played pretty well to end the season. He had a lot of serious bumps and bruises playing wise early in the season. But again, he was playing for like Josh McDaniels, who was terrible. He was a 4th-round rookie thrown in there with no QB1 reps. He didn't have a lot of things going for him other than, Devontae Adams and hand the ball off to Josh Jacobs. But hopefully this offseason and, with Luke Getsy as a new offensive coordinator, he can show what he's got. But I said probably 6 months ago, if we start week 1 against the Chargers in what, like 87 days from now, we fucked up at quarterback. And that might be the case. That might be the case.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I won't mention any names or family members, but I did have
Yeah.
friends and family who were trying to convince me that Caleb Williams was not the pick, and because the Bears can never develop a quarterback, just roll with Tyson Badgett and sign someone in the next year or two. I'm so glad that did not happen, but I'm also happy to not have to choose between AOC and Gardner Minshew. So,
Well, look,
uh,
even if you, I mean, look, if you traded that, what do you think you would have gotten for the number one overall pick, right? Like you, yeah, I mean, you're talking three firsts, and they'd have to throw in like a Pro Bowler. Like I remember, like some of Raider Nation was talking about it, like, oh, we should trade to number one. I'm like, guys, like it's gonna cost three firsts and like Max Crosby
yeah,
to like
yeah,
just
that's what it
have
would
the
have been.
conversation is what would be
Yep.
required. So it's tough. I mean, I mean, look, Caleb Williams, like I'm as optimistic about him as anyone, but you could have had three other first rounders, maybe more, plus an all pro. I mean, you got all those picks from trading number one before. I mean, it would be the Bears way, right? Just get like the next, like Jim McMahon 2.0, and then just like the
Yep.
best of everything else on rookie contracts. Not the worst
Yep,
thing in the world.
yep. No, it's not. Also not the worst thing in the world is letting everyone know they could listen to you on Sirius XM Mondays and Fridays as you solo host, Thursdays with Alan Jouban, 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Sirius XM channel 156 Fight Nation. RJ Clifford, it was so good to catch up with you. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we do this a little more often, not like 6 years in between interviews.
It's like I always say, I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little stitious.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. I
Thanks, Mike.
appreciate it.